Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Genesis Community Livecast. This is our Genesis Shapers recap episode for August 2021. I think last month I said 2020. Shapers meeting entitled WordPress 5.8 Theme.json and Upsell Strategies for Agencies. I think people were telling their friends about this, using all of that in the title. But for those unfamiliar, my name is David Vogelpohl. I've been a proud member of the Genesis community for over 8 years, and I love helping the Genesis community get better together with my friends from the Shapers. And joining me today is one of my friends from the Shapers, but he often doesn't get to show up. He has to kind of participate asynchronously there, but for some very good reasons. I'd like to welcome to this Shapers recap episode, Mr. Rob Stinson of WP Engine. Rob, welcome to the recap episode.
G'day, everyone. It's good to be here. Shapers often occurs at odd hours for me, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. So it's kind of good to join something live. It's fun.
I know. I like how you started with good day there to telegraph the geography and the time zone differences. It's funny, Rob. I remember what was it yesterday? We were talking about what is it, World Time Buddy or something like that, the website I use to coordinate meetings across time zones. And I came to use that site because of the Shapers meeting and trying to schedule it. And you just can't schedule a meeting with people in Europe, North America, and Australia without somebody being stuck out on time.
It's true. I think I've been working async, sort of remote in worldwide companies and teams for 5 or 6 years, actually maybe even longer. And I've never been able to properly and beautifully solve the whole figure out a time for a meeting thing. It's just as you get it figured out, daylight savings kicks in for someone and it just throws it
all off. We did take into account Australia though when we chose our time. We just took in the west coast of Australia into account and not the east coast.
I'll just jump in the car every Tuesday and drive across country then.
yes, that was for Lee there in Perth. So yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, we'll go ahead and jump into the Shapers agenda, the questions that we ask the Shapers every week. And Rob and I'll kind of break down the questions and people's responses and our own thoughts. So we'll go ahead and jump right into that. So the first question that we ask of every Shapers meeting is, can we get a show of emoji for those in attendance? And we have two people with the hand waving emoji here. We have Nick Croft, author of the book Genesis Explained. We also have Mike Hemberger of My Themes. John Brown replies with a wave emoji that looks like that, the Japanese art version of the wave, not a wave, waving hand, but the ocean wave.
Very meta.
Well, I know. I didn't realize that until just now, actually, when I said it out loud. That's crazy. Brian Gardner there with the peace sign. Ryan Kenstra, your buddy there, right? Right, Rob?
Yeah, we've been mates for a long time. Ryan's a legend.
Yeah.
If you see him in Slack, I was going to say, if anyone sees him in Slack, make sure you say good day to him, or hiya, howdy, however you like to say
it. He's in South America right now, right? So maybe
Yeah, he's out in Mexico. That's it.
There you go. Okay, so maybe more Central America then. Very interesting. That's cool. And then how do you know Ryan? I think we just kind of breezed over. We're like, oh, this is Rob Stinson with WP Engine. I didn't explain your background.
I've worked with Ryan for years and years. Actually, we worked together previously at an agency, XWP. Me in either a project management role. Actually, that's right. When I first joined, I was a project manager, and he was on the very first team that I helped run. So yeah, 5 or 6 years I've been working with Ryan in various different projects and capacities.
What's your Genesis connection there to Ryan? What's that part?
Obviously I work with WP Engine as a product marketer and work very closely with the Genesis team. So help representing the product, the market and everything. But with Ryan, he's one of the senior engineers on Genesis. And we both joined the team together, actually. We came from our heritage together was with Block Lab, which was a plugin that we both built together with another friend of ours, Luke. And we that was all about making it easy for people to create custom blocks for the new block editor. Great plugin, and we decided to bring that sort of technology and innovation over to the Genesis team. So that plugin is now represented by Genesis Custom Blocks. So Ryan's the lead engineer on that plugin, and then I sort of interact from a bit of product design, actually, but from a product marketing perspective on that plugin and the rest of the cool stuff in Genesis.
I know. I think a lot of people might probably be familiar with you from your blog post, certainly on the Studio Press blog. I know that I've personally seen around your how to build a custom collection post to many, many people. So thank you for those contributions as well, Rob. We'll go ahead and keep on going though with the emoji. We got Ryan Murray here of 3200 Creative with a rice scene, so some more Japanese art. Good to see. There must have been a theme that day. We got Nawai Bidola with a hand wave. Sally Getch rhymes like sketch with like that looks like a high five. I don't quite know. Maybe it's a wave, but good to see her there. She said she hasn't seen 7 a.m. in 6 weeks. She's in California, so this is really early for her. And then Anita with a nice hand raise. All right, cool. Anita Carter, for those unfamiliar, the creative diva. All right, cool. Next up, we have our first kind of material question for the shapers around topics of interest. And the first one is, if you run a theme company, how did your customers fare with upgrading to WordPress 5.8 relative to changes to the widget area? And so for those unfamiliar, in version 5.8 of WordPress, there were updates to the widget area in WordPress, and it was kind of this more block first approach to widgets. And with the change, certain sites and many Genesis sites that rely on widgets had certain kinds of errors with the update. Now, the Genesis engineering team, this is primarily for Genesis framework sites for clarity, but the Genesis engineering team, of course, tests versions of WordPress before they go live and had discovered this ahead of time. And in Genesis 3.34, we had released basically a setting which disabled the update for blocks relative to the widget area. Now, this was not something we just kind of pulled out of thin air. It was actually a recommendation that was kind of provided to theme providers for this very reason. They're on WordPress.org. Rob, were you following that very closely? I mean, I know like in the general WordPress and Genesis world, that was a big thing, but did you follow this widget and block item very closely at all?
Yeah, generally. It's interesting because it's a little bit of a milestone because, I mean, 2 years, the block editor has been in WordPress, right? And for all its highs and lows, it's generally only been responsible for the content area. And so the introduction of the block, experience to widgets is a major milestone in terms of it breaking out of just that content area. Obviously, we're looking down the line towards full site editing and, the block editor being everything within WordPress, really, I suppose, creating and managing a site and everything. So to have it start to handle widgets, it's a kind of an important moment. So I've not heard anything in the wider WordPress community particularly negative. Like I've not had, this is a massive disaster, this has ruined everything, why should we do this? Like I've not observed.
I have data, Rob. Well, not maybe data, but I have anecdotal asking of our support people, because this, when this started coming up with 3.34, and Nathan Rice had DM'd me on Slack and was like, hey, this is coming down, FYI. So I checked it out. It was, I thought it was I hadn't really considered it very much in terms of like the implication to WordPress itself, but rather thinking about it through the lens of implications. But I think from the support side, I immediately thought, well, geez, I wonder if, I wonder, and again, this affects other themes that rely on widgets and other types of WordPress sites that rely on widgets. And so I'm thinking like, well, geez, if this was maybe a big deal for a lot of Genesis sites, maybe it's a big deal in general. And of course, theme providers can also implement the same I guess, feature, if you will, to like turn off the block editor in the widget area. But we have not seen that be a problem for WP Engine customers in a grand scale, Genesis or otherwise, with the rollout of 5.8. So, and I've been monitoring it in our internal Slack channels where we monitor the health of WordPress rollouts, because on the WP Engine platform, all customers always are on an updated version of WordPress for security, and that's a big part of that. So we do these forced rollouts, but we monitor the health of them, to make sure customers are in good shape. And we haven't actually seen a lot. I keep asking about it, but people are like, "Oh, that's a good point. We'll check on it," and then like it just never materializes into anything big. So it seems to have been a very clean rollout.
No news is good news.
Yeah, absolutely. The support people always love me. I'm like, what about this? What about that? And they're like, oh yeah, that's a good point. And then sometimes it's nothing, but it's good to check, right? And that's why you do stuff like that. I like Nawai Baidola. He's with Awesome Press, their theme company out of Spain. And he has a wonderful, wonderful set of products there. But he always has the answer where you're like, is this a problem? He's like, no, it's not a problem at all. Like they run such a clean operation, like with their customers and their products. It's like they prep everybody so well that he's always got it was just fine. But that's what he says here. They didn't have any issues with 5.8. He kind of credited that though to all of his themes being block based. So Awesome Press is a fairly new theme company. So like right out of the gate, they weren't really making widget based themes. Now, Nawai has been in Genesis for a while. So like he has made, obviously many quote widget based themes, but his Awesome Press themes from the get go were block based. So that was kind of easy for him to deal with, it looks like. Let's see what else. So Anita is saying, and I'm not going to name this other theme company she's working with. Not this is, bad reflection on them or anything, but she's working with another theme company. And she basically says when it came out, they were overwhelmed with tickets around the customizer. And, I kind of asked her, I was like, well, were the tickets related to people that had not updated to Genesis 3.3.4? Because, this included the feature which turned it off. And yeah, she said it was related to people who had not performed that update prior to the 5.5 update. So for whatever reason, that was a more pronounced issue with her. And it looks like Mike Hemberger of My Theme says that they had no real issues there. But again, he's kind of reporting back that they barely use widget areas. So I'm wondering
the dependency was low.
Yeah, I was wondering if the theme company she's working with leveraged widget-based themes more heavily. I think they're leveraging blocks, but maybe they're not, maybe they're older themes in particular. But we didn't see Genesis or Studio Press support blow up over this as well either. So it's kind of interesting that Anita had a harder time with it. And sometimes sometimes exploding is relative too, right? Like you get 20 emails all at the same time and you're like, I'm exploding, right? I don't know, but I'm not questioning what she said, but like, you know what I mean? And then what does Sally Getch here say? She's basically saying that, her legacy sites are more the issue. But again, Sally's pretty on top of things with managing her sites. So, all right.
It seems that
go ahead.
For her, it looks like because we pushed the Genesis update. It was on a week or two before the 5.8 update rolled out. We gave, it looks like her clients or the people that she works with were able to get that update out. So by the time 5.8 update occurred, everything was in place. So the timing there seemed to have made a good difference for her.
Yeah, it was okay timing. I think it was like within a week of the launch of 5.8 is when 3.34 was out, if I remember correctly. Like it wasn't a 6-month notice, but the other thing is like I know Rob, you know this, but for those watching, like as these things are evolving and coming up to the release candidate, and then you have the release candidate, and then you kind of get through the rest of the cycle onto release, you're testing as a software provider to say like, okay, is this new stuff going to break my stuff or do I need to change things? And then as it gets more and more into that finalized state, then you can take your software and get it more and more into that finalized state. So that's why sometimes these timeframes are very close together on things like that. It's also why, like, when you update your iPhone, like you have like 500 apps that all need to update at the same time because iOS updated, right? All right, cool. Moving on. Next question. Have you tried theme.json in WP WordPress 5.8? If so, what are your thoughts and observations on the approach? I think like the folks I've spoken to, we'll get to the Shapers responses in a minute, but like it's really about simplification and efficiency. And I feel like a lot of people are getting very excited about theme.json. But Rob, like you're definitely more knowledgeable in this area than me. Have you played with theme.json? Do you have an opinion on the approach relative to 5.8?
Yeah, I have. I'm continuing to play around with it, as I think many people are, because it's still an emerging, layer within WordPress. And my opinion on it generally is that I like it. It's actually making theme styling in this new block first world more accessible, which I love.
Can you explain for people watching what theme.json is, I guess?
Yeah, so it's a single file really. So theme.json, so an actual JSON file, and it's a structured approach, a highly opinionated and structured approach to configuring a theme. So styling what features are available. You might, turning off and on certain things about the way the block editor works, your base colors, fonts, and things like that for the whole site. So global styling, but it's a very structured approach, and it's simple. You're not having to, install node packages or dependencies and things like that. And that's what I mean by it's more accessible. Someone can spin up a theme.json file, a single file, and follow the documentation, which is pretty good, but still improving, and configure the site. And that's fantastic. And I have this observation about WordPress. It's kind of like an opinion it's evolving a bit, where the easy things within WordPress are getting easier. So writing and building out a page, with columns and interesting layouts is easier now in WordPress because of the block editor. And I feel like theme.json represents sort of the next piece of all of that. It's making theme customization easier. People don't need to spin up complex local development environments and workflows to be able to step in and configure a theme. And in what modern web development is for many people, which is really hard and complex, this is really, really refreshing. So I'm excited for it. Maybe there's small improvements that could be made in how it's done, but in general, I think this is awesome.
Okay, that's great to hear. I think I immediately went to the web team here at WP Engine who manages our internal sites, and they were like, "Oh, our last project would have been so much easier, so much more simpler, so many less lines." And it was, it'll be interesting. But I would say, looking at the rest of the respondents here, it looks like there's a lot of fans. It looks like there's a lot of folks who have tried it out a little bit, but not really dug in. It looks like Brian Gardner, the founder of Studio Press, he's making a new Genesis theme called Frost. Looks like he played around with it quite a bit, but I mean, that's like anything, right? It's like, this t-shirt came out the day I got this t-shirt at the WordCamp where WordPress 5.0 was kind of released there at WordCamp US in Nashville. And it just reminded me of this with theme.json is who's building production sites with Gutenberg the day it's released, right? Not a lot of people. So it takes time for things to mature, but it also takes time for people to adopt, right? And so I still think we are in that play around phase. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I didn't get a t-shirt for theme.json though. That I do feel left out of that. Is this the right one? Nope. This is the wrong one, Rob. This is from 2 years.
The wrong Nashville one.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's 2 years before that one. This one's from 2016, which I don't even remember what happened that one. Maybe that was the Learn JavaScript Deeply one there in Philly.
Sounds about right. The timing, yeah, it was a couple of years before.
Yeah, this is the Learn
JavaScript release.
Oh my goodness, so great. Okay, cool. Next up, what are you working on that you would like us? The next question for the Shapers: what are you working on that you would like us to share with the rest of the Genesis community? I already spoiled one. I said that Brian Gardner is working on a new Genesis framework theme called Frost. Clean like a jelly bean, of course, knowing Brian Gardner's design style. Very colorful as well, and then block-based. So really excited about Frost. I think we'll be featuring that on the Studio Press Marketplace soon. Of course, it's always great to have Brian Gardner still around. John Brown releasing a companion plugin called Defrost. No, just kidding. Well, that was his joke. He misses here. It's his joke. Sally says she wished she'd been working on anything in July. I guess she's been kind of out of sorts there, but looks like we have Frost. I know we have some cool stuff from Nawai on the theme front, so we'll have more to come there. But that was good to hear about Frost there from Brian Gardner. I think we should have him back on like one of these video recaps. I feel like he's done a couple of these already, but we should have him back, I feel.
That'd be nice.
Speaking of Phil, I like that. The next question is, have you tried Phil Johnston's code snippet to hide the license notification in Genesis Blocks Pro for Pro Plus customers? So the backstory here, for those unfamiliar, is that if you, for Pro Plus customers, we basically released Genesis Blocks Pro plugin as well as Genesis Custom Blocks Pro plugin for free, for all of those customers. Now there's a license key with it. And for Pro Plus customers that have kind of lifetime license access in that way, it didn't make sense to issue a lifetime key. So Phil Johnson provided a code snippet. If for some reason you're checking this episode out on YouTube, go to studiopress.blog, find the blog post for this video. There'll be a link there to the code snippet. And if you found it on the Studio Press blog, just look below this video and there's a link to the code snippet. You can download it there, but it looked like some people weren't aware of it, but it did make the rounds there over the last couple of weeks. All right, that was a pretty simple question, like, have you seen it? And people are like, ooh, I did not, I will check it out. So not much to discuss, but we'll move on to the next question. Help us help the community. So this is for everyone listening and watching. If you provide client services, what are your favorite upsells to your existing clients to get them to buy more from you? And we're going to share them now with the community. And the idea here is that if you're running a freelancer or an agency business, what can you do to upsell clients that you've already sold to in the past to buy more from you? Let's see, what is John Brown here?
I think that's that one's related to the previous one.
Talking about the prior topic. Yeah, I gotcha. So like, I don't know, like one of my favorite techniques for this is to like go audit their site and look for something else that could be optimized. Like, hey, I noticed that you never address this, like you do this. Have you done this before, Rob? Or like in your freelancing work, do people just like find you on the street and accost you until you do stuff for them?
Yeah, just people are kicking my door down. I was just too much business. I was turning away. No, not really at all. We would often do things like performance reviews or optimizations, things like that. So often businesses often, whether it was my agency or the agency I worked for, XWP, they would often just engage us around like, we're rolling out a new brand or a new product. So it was often very design orientated or very feature orientated. It was very rare that a business would come and say, hey, can you just make our stuff faster? But there was always the value of having improved performance within the web for user experience. SEO is profound. So we'd often be able to come and say, yes, we can do all this design and build and feature stuff for you. But while we're here, look, let's talk about optimization and improving performance here. These are the reasons why it's great. While we're in your code base, let's look for opportunities to improve across the board. And we frequently have wins. And the great thing is the ROI for the customer is always there. So optimization, especially around performance. We did, security as well, accessibility, but performance was something that we
kind of taking it that next step, right? Like you might have done the design, but we're going to do another level of optimization. And that new level is kind of the upsell angle there.
Yeah, that's right.
It's funny here. Sally Getch replies, she's like, I can't keep up with the work I have. Like, I'm not doing any upselling. This. And I reply back and I was like, well, wouldn't an upsell idea be to call other agencies and freelancers and offer them to do their overflow work? And, you know, I mean, I made that as kind of a counterpoint to her point there, right? Like, isn't that an idea? But I mean, that's literally what I did in my agency days. And I got amazing clients out of it. I got Pioneer Electronics, remember them? Like the ones that make the audio equipment. And who else? Esurance, which is a major insurance company, at least in the US. And like, but I got them by calling a bigger agency and saying, hey, I've got some like really great WordPress developers and we've got extra time. Do you have overflow work? Do you want to send us? And I don't think I called maybe 5 places before 2 of them were like, sure. And then one of them ended up sending those material leads. I mean, it was very little effort because I mean, I think
that's fantastic.
like agencies and freelancer businesses, in my opinion, are feast or famine, right? Like you have 2 modes. You either not have a lot of work or you have way too much work, or like you're the kind of agency or freelancer who always has too much work, or you're the kind who's always struggling to find the next client. But like there are so many out there that are swamped, like Sally here, and please don't all swarm her and offer her over. But you know what I mean? Like, but like it's always out there, and like whatever you're good at, there's somebody that's not good at that thing. And like if you can just find that connection, you know, these notions of competitors really, frankly, become companions in helping you.
Oh yeah, and I had a conversation with some of the crew from our agency partner program at WP Engine, and we had this exact point. They said agencies compete with each other far less than people would assume. There's a lot more collaboration and, you know, working together than people assume. That you automatically like, well, they're serving the same industry in the same way as this other company, they must just be like, you know, they're enemies, you know. But there is a lot less of that than you would assume. There's a lot more collaboration and a lot more opportunity for collaboration. So yeah, great point. Call around, you know, ask to help out.
Yeah, I was going to say the classic example is like when a developer freelancer teams up with a designer freelancer, right?
Yeah.
But like, that's like, I don't have the skills, so I'm going to get one other freelancer, I guess. Then you also have the notion of like, I am a freelancer and I'm going to go work as a freelancer for an agency. And I think that's really an interesting, you know, modality, because it can lead to very reliable work for folks. You know, and I think sometimes the downside is that in that mode, you may or may not be working for a lower rate than you normally would, your quote retail rate versus like the rate you might work for another agency, because they're, you know, subsequently marking it up. So what I found was most successful was kind of trying to establish it such that I had the direct relationship with the client. Like while the other agency brought me in, they knew me, they signed the contract with me. I was the one they interacted with. Now for this agency, that was great because they didn't want to have to deal with the tech parts. They made beautiful designs, charged a bunch of money for that. And then they needed someone to do the tech implementation parts, but they didn't want to get like wound up in the details of all that. So that was the way I found I could actually command a high price without like just being their secret, you know, development arm, and they're paying me like sub retail rates or something like that. So, well, that was it for questions for the Shapers meeting for this this round. Rob, anything else on 5.8 or anything else you want to drop in the Genesis blocks, custom blocks, or framework world before we end the episode here?
No, there's a couple of new posts on the Studio Press blog that are worth checking out. They're like short, quick tip style tutorials. Planning to do a few more of those. So if you're regularly doing,
give us a topic.
One of them. So within Genesis blocks, obviously we have a growing library of collections, which are fantastic. But if you're working with like a brand team who may have even built a custom collection that's on brand for their brand, you don't want all of the other collections. You only want, your content creators to have your collection because that's the brand one. So little tutorial on deregistering all those other collections and removing them from the library. So little things like that. I did that one yesterday. That one's pretty useful. We've had a couple of questions come in about that. So check that one out. There's another one. Can't remember what the other one is about, but it's probably good as well. And there'll be some more. So keep an eye on it.
All right, good deal. Thanks for mentioning that. Well, thanks so much for joining us for the recap episode. Us, me here. Thanks for joining me for the recap episode.
No, it was good. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Awesome. So glad to have you here. We'll have you back for sure. Thanks everyone else for listening and tuning in here and watching. Please stay tuned for future episodes of the Genesis Community Livecast. Again, I've been your host, David Vogelpohl. I've been a proud member of the Genesis community for over 8 years, and I love helping the Genesis community get better together with my friends from the Shapers.